Myra Vale had been married to Ren for 6 years, and in 6 years she had learned the specific, accumulated knowledge that 6 years of shared life produced. The knowledge of how he took his coffee in the morning, which was without anything added, and in the largest cup available. The knowledge of how he moved through the dwelling when he thought she was asleep, which was with the specific, practiced quiet of someone who had learned to move quietly in spaces where other people were sleeping, and who had not unlearned the habit when the spaces became domestic rather than operational, though she had not known this interpretation at the time. The knowledge of how he looked when a problem interested him, which was with the full, still quality of someone whose attention, when it was fully engaged, was the kind of attention that produced solutions. And the knowledge of how he looked at the garden on the evenings when the work had gone well, and the garden was doing what a well-maintained garden did, which was the specific, satisfied quality of someone who had found, in the patient cultivation of growing things, a satisfaction that was not available in other contexts, and that he valued precisely because of its specificity. She had not known in 6 years that the practiced quiet with which he moved through the dwelling at night was the quiet of someone who had spent years moving through spaces where sound had consequences. She had not known that the full, still quality of his engaged attention had been calibrated over 17 years of operational command to the specific purpose of identifying solutions under conditions that made most people's attention scatter rather than focus. She had not known that the satisfied quality in the garden was the specific satisfaction of someone who had chosen the garden as the expression of a principle. The principle that the life he was living now was the life he had chosen, and that the choosing was ongoing, and that the garden was one of the ways the choosing was made visible to himself. She had known he was gentle. This was the word she used internally, not as a diminishment, not as a simplification, but as an accurate description of the register he had chosen for the life they shared. Gentle in the way of someone for whom the gentleness was a decision rather than a default. Patient. Present. The quality of someone who had looked at the available registers for a life and had selected this one with the deliberateness of someone who understood what the other registers felt like and had decided this one was the register he wanted. She had met him on Sorath Prime's orbital research station, where she had been managing the atmospheric processor calibration schedule, and he had been contracted to resolve a cascading failure in the navigation processing network. He had resolved it in 4 hours and repaired it in 2 days. And on his 3rd day on the station, she had sat across from him in the communal dining area, because the table was the one with the best viewport, and she had a habit of eating with a view, and he had been there first, and had not appeared to object to sharing the table. And they had talked for 2 hours about atmospheric chemistry and computational modeling, and the specific, underappreciated elegance of systems that worked so well that nobody thought about them. She had found him interesting, he had found her interesting. The finding had been mutual in the unhurried, unperformed way that genuine mutual findings between two people who were both comfortable with silence were mutual, without the urgency of people who were afraid the thing would disappear if they did not pursue it aggressively. Because neither of them was afraid of that, and the thing did not disappear. And in 6 months they were together, and in 8 months they were on Sorath Prime, and in a year they were married, and in 6 years they had the dwelling and the garden and the dinners on the nights she worked late, and the physical books on the shelves that he had built into the wall rather than purchasing as furniture. And the life was the life she had not expected to find, and that she valued with the quiet intensity of someone who understood that good lives were not guaranteed. He had told her he had a military background, logistics and systems coordination, support division, nothing dramatic a long time ago. She had accepted this because it fit the system's thinking, the logistical precision, the practiced quiet, the patience. She had not asked for more because he had not offered more and she had not needed more. The man she knew was sufficient for the life they were building. This was accurate. It was also incomplete. The 43rd day of the Herath Sovereignty's blockade of the Sorath Collective's outer systems began as the 42nd day had ended, with the monitoring data showing the blockade fleet's position, and the Sorath Collective's defense forces counterposition and the specific, static tension of a standoff that had been building for 3 months, and that the Sorath Collective's diplomatic channels had been attempting to resolve, and that the diplomatic channels had not resolved. Myra was at the Environmental Systems Facility when the preliminary positioning report reached the Sorath Collective's public emergency channel. She read it with the professional attention she brought to emergency alerts, assessing, prioritizing, determining the relevant protocols. The report described the Herath sovereignty's fleet elements repositioning in a configuration that the Defense Monitoring's analysis assessed as consistent with a transition from blockade to active military engagement. She calmed Ren. He answered immediately, as he always did. She told him about the positioning report. She told him she might need to stay at the facility. She gave him her assessment of the protocol timeline. He listened. He was quiet for a moment after she finished, the specific quality of quiet that preceded his responses when he was processing something larger than the surface of what had been said. "Come home," he said. "The facility protocols can run without you for the next few hours. Come home first." She knew his voice. She had been knowing his voice for 6 years. The voice on the comm was his voice, and it was also underneath, something she had not heard before, not a different voice, but a different quality in the familiar one, the quality of something very large and very still that was in the process of becoming less still. "Are you all right?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Come home." She came home. He was in the garden, standing very still among the hybrid varieties that he had been cultivating for 3 seasons, not attending to them, but standing in the place where he attended to them, which was the place he went when he was processing something significant. She stood at the garden's edge and looked at him, at the back of her husband of 6 years, at the stillness that was the stillness of complete attention rather than the stillness of inattention. "Ren," she said. He turned. He looked at her with the expression she knew, and with the thing underneath the expression that she had heard in the comm's voice, and was now seeing, the something very large becoming less still quality, present in his face in a way that the 6 years had not previously shown her. "The preliminary positioning," he said. "The Herath fleet's configuration, I saw the monitoring report. The Defense Monitoring assessment said it was consistent with a transition to active engagement," she said. "No," he said, "it isn't. A standard transition to active engagement would position the heavy fleet elements at the outer system boundary, with the support formation in a standard envelopment configuration. What the monitoring report shows is the heavy elements at the outer boundary with the support formation in a deep pincer." He paused. "That's not a transition to active engagement. That's a positioning for rapid systemic assault. The distinction is..." He stopped. She looked at him. He was looking at the monitoring data on the small display he had brought into the garden, and he was looking at it with the quality of someone reading something that the display said, and also reading something that the display did not say. "Ren," she said, "how do you know what that positioning pattern means?" He looked at her, the expression and the underneath thing both present. "Logistics and systems coordination," she said. "Support division, nothing dramatic." He was quiet for a long moment. "That was true," he said, "as far as it went." "How far did it go?" she said. He looked at the garden. He looked at her. He said, with the quality of someone who has been holding something at distance for a long time and who is in the moment of deciding that the distance is no longer the right choice. "Further than I told you." He told her in the garden. He told her about the Accord's Strategic Command Division, about the 4 campaigns and the 17 years of operational command, about the fleet engagements, the Veth engagements specifically, which were the ones the galaxy's military analysts had referenced most often in the years when his record was unsealed. He told her about the 4th Reach campaign and the final engagement that had ended it in 72 hours, with a response that the Accord's military archive had documented as without precedent in recorded fleet engagement history. He told her about the sealed record, why he had requested the sealing, the specific, careful logic of removing the documentation while understanding that the documentation was not the thing itself. The documentation was the map, and the territory remained whether the map existed or not. He told her about the 9 years, the choice that the 9 years represented. The garden as the expression of the choice, not a retreat, not a hiding, but a deliberate and repeated selection of this life over the other one. She listened without interrupting. She had spent 6 years with a man who said what he meant and meant what he said, and she gave him the same quality of attention now that she would have given him if he were describing the atmospheric chemistry conversation from the station's communal dining area. Complete, present, without the performance of reception. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The Herath fleet's positioning," she said. "The deep pincer, what does it actually mean?" "It means the Herath sovereignty is not planning a standard military engagement," he said. "A standard engagement targets the defense forces. The deep pincer positions for simultaneous strike on the outer system's inhabited installations, and the defense forces simultaneously. They're not planning to defeat the Sorath Collective's military. They're planning to make the military irrelevant by removing what the military is defending. She understood this. She understood it with the directness of someone who processed information accurately rather than managing it toward a preferred interpretation. Sorath Prime, she said. Yes, he said. The Defense Command doesn't know this, she said. The Defense Monitoring's assessment is a standard pattern matching analysis, he said. The deep pincer's distinction from a standard transition formation requires knowledge of the opposing commander's typical operational parameters to identify as intentional. The defense monitoring system doesn't have that knowledge. Do you? She said. He looked at the monitoring data. The Herath Sovereignty's current operational commander was a junior analyst in the Fourth Reach campaign, he said. He was in the opposing forces planning division. I know his approach. I've seen him build toward this formation before. She was quiet for a long moment. The garden was around them, the hybrid varieties in the evening light, the patient cultivation of 3 seasons. She looked at the garden and at the dwelling and at her husband of 6 years, who had just told her that he knew how the Herath Sovereignty's operational commander thought, because they had engaged across a fleet formation 18 years ago, and that the commander was positioning his fleet to remove the world she was born on. What do we do? She said. I need to contact the Sorath Collective's Defense Command, he said, and tell them what the positioning actually means. They won't know who you are, she said. Your record is sealed, why would they listen? Because what I tell them will be specific enough that they'll listen even without knowing who I am, he said. The specificity is the credential. And if they don't listen, she said. He was quiet for a longer moment. He looked at the garden. He looked at her. Then we move to the next step, he said, which is more complicated. How much more complicated? She said. He looked at the monitoring data, at the deep pincer formation with the support elements positioned relative to the inhabited system coordinates. Significantly, he said. She looked at him for a long time. Tell me the rest of it, she said. All of it, not the version that was as far as it went, the rest. That will take more than tonight, he said. How long until the Herath commander makes his move? She said. He'll complete the pincer positioning first, he said. 12 to 16 hours. Then we have 12 to 16 hours, she said. Start. He started. They were inside by the time the telling reached its most significant parts. The operational specifics, the engagement histories, the final night of the Fourth Reach campaign's decisive engagement. She listened to all of it with the same complete attention. She asked questions when she needed clarification and not when she didn't, which was the quality of a listener who was following the information rather than managing her response to it. When he reached the part about what he was capable of, the specific, technical, operational description of what the capability was and what it produced when fully deployed, he gave it to her the way he gave her everything. Accurately without performance, with the precision of someone who understood that the accurate version was the only version worth giving. She received it the same way. She didn't manage her response. The response was understanding, which was larger than she had anticipated, and which she held with the same quality she brought to emergency situations at the Environmental Systems Facility. Present, assessing, not scattering. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. The Herath Sovereignty's fleet, she said. If it comes to the full response, what happens to them? If it comes to what I am capable of, he said, the Herath Sovereignty's fleet will cease to be a functional strategic force. Their command structure will understand clearly that what they chose to do was not something they can recover from strategically. At what cost, she said, to you? He was quiet. The last time it cost me the capacity to continue being that person, he said. The ceiling, the 9 years, the garden. He looked at the garden through the window. I don't know what it costs this time. She looked at him for a long moment. Let's hope, she said, that the Defense Force's counterpincer is sufficient. Yes, he said, let's hope. The communication to the Sorath Collective's Defense Command went in the 3rd hour. The Defense Command's response arrived in 20 minutes. Fast for a military command structure receiving information from an unidentified civilian. Fast because the communication's specificity had done what he said it would do. The response, who are you and how do you know this? His reply, the source of the information is less relevant than its accuracy. Verify the positioning assessment against your own monitoring data. The support element coordinates I have provided match your monitoring data or they do not. If they match, the assessment is accurate regardless of its source. 11 minutes later. The Defense Command's second response, which did not ask again who he was, which asked only, "What do you recommend?" The counterpincer recommendation followed the repositioning of the defense forces from the standard engagement pattern to a counterpincer formation, closing the gap in the outer system's southwestern quadrant that the Herath positioning was exploiting. They believed the assessment, he told Myra when he showed her the exchange. The assessment is verifiable. I knew they would verify it. She read the messages. She understood, in reading the second response's absence of the identity question, that the Defense Command had verified the coordinates and had found them accurate, and had made the rapid, practical decision that accurate information from an unknown source was more immediately useful than verified information from a known source that arrived later. The counterpincer repositioning began in the 4th hour. He told her about the probability 40% chance that the Herath commander would choose the third variation, the insertion trajectory, rather than the two addressable variations. She noted the 40%. She understood what it meant. She did not manage her understanding toward a more comfortable version. If he identifies you and decides to remove the source, she said, what then? We stop him, he said. The Sarath Collective's defense force can't intercept 3 strike vessels on a precision insertion trajectory. In time, if the counterpincer repositioning has moved the eastern contingent, she said. I calculated the probability of the third variation when I recommended the repositioning, he said. The counterpincer was the correct move regardless. The 40% probability of the insertion trajectory was an acceptable operational risk. And now the 40% has happened, she said. Not yet, he said. In the 10th hour if it happens. In the 10th hour it happened. 3 Herath strike vessels detached from the main fleet formation and began a trajectory towards Sarath Prime. The precision insertion trajectory, not the standard military approach trajectory. The trajectory that said the target was specific, and the approach was designed to reach the specific target. The alert reached Myra's communicator. She read it. She looked at Ren. He had already seen it. He was standing very still in the dwelling's main room with the monitoring display, and the stillness was the something very large that has arrived quality, not becoming any more arrived. It's the third, she said. Yes, he said. She looked at him. Ren, she said. I know, he said. She went to him. She put her hand against his face, the gesture that was theirs, that had been theirs for 6 years, the specific physical language of the life they had built. He looked at her. Come back, she said. Yes, he said. She went to the Environmental Systems facility. He made the communication on the Herath Fleet's open command frequency, not a private channel, the open command frequency. Every vessel in the Herath Fleet received it simultaneously. The communication was 43 seconds long. In the 43 seconds, he said his name, not the name he used on Sarath Prime, the name in the sealed record, the name that the Herath commander would recognize from the 4th Reach campaign. He described what he had observed about the commander's positioning. He described what he understood the commander's intention to be. He said, the 3 strike vessels currently on insertion trajectory towards Sarath Prime should reverse their trajectory. Then he said what would happen if they did not. He said it in the operational language of someone making an assessment rather than a threat. Precisely, accurately, without raising his voice, with the quality of someone describing an atmospheric system's operational parameters at their full depth. He described the specific, comprehensive, precedent-free response that the Accord's military archive had documented from the 4th Reach campaign's final engagement. He described what the Herath Sovereignty's fleet would experience if the strike vessels maintained their trajectory. He described it completely. He said it without performance. The 43-second communication ended. There was silence on the open command frequency. The 3 Herath strike vessels began to decelerate. They decelerated for 4 minutes while the Herath command structure verified the name, running the identifying characteristics against the sealed record's perimeter, finding the 17 citations, finding the cross-reference entry, finding the summary. The summary was enough. In the 4th minute, the 3 Herath strike vessels reversed their trajectory. In the 5th minute, the Herath commander responded on the open command frequency, so that every vessel in the fleet heard it the same way they had heard the 43-second communication. 6 words, confirmed identification, withdrawing, this engagement ends. Over the following 3 hours, the Herath fleet withdrew from the Sarath Collective's outer systems. Not a tactical withdrawal, a complete withdrawal. The withdrawal of a commander who had recalculated the entire strategic situation in the light of the 43 seconds, and had determined that the strategic situation was not one he wished to continue. Myra returned to the dwelling 3 hours after she had left. He was in the garden. She stood at the garden's edge and looked at him at the back of her husband of 6 years, standing among the hybrid varieties in the specific quality of the moment after something very large, which was the moment of returning to the ordinary life, and finding that it was still there and that the returning was possible. She walked into the garden. She stood beside him. He looked at her. The husband expression and the underneath thing were both present and both, in this moment, different than they had been for the 2 days, the underneath thing quieter, the husband expression more present, the two things existing simultaneously without the tension that had existed between them since the 43rd day. The withdrawal is complete, she said. Yes, he said. The Defense Command has the open frequency recording, she said. Yes, he said. They'll search the name, she said. Yes, he said. The sealed record stops them at the summary. The summary is enough for them to understand what happened. She looked at the garden, at the hybrid varieties that had needed 3 seasons to reach this quality, at the dwelling behind them with the books on the built-in shelves, and the kitchen with the used quality of 6 years of dinners. The galaxy will search it too, she said. Every vessel in the Herath fleet received the communication. They'll all search the name. Yes, he said. The name is out, she said. Yes, he said. What does that mean, she said, for the life we built? He was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the garden, the dwelling, the middle distance where the environmental systems facility stood. It means the life will be visible in a way it wasn't before, he said. People will know where I am. Some will see it as an invitation, to test the capability or to request it. What do you do when people request it? She said. I have been declining for 9 years, he said. And now, she said. He looked at the garden. He looked at Myra, the 6 years and the atmospheric chemistry and the unhurried mutual finding and her hand against his face and come back. Now I continue to decline, he said. The name being known changes the visibility. It doesn't change the choice. She looked at him for a long moment. The choice, she said. The garden, the books, the dinners. Yes, he said. You still choose those, she said. Yes, he said. I still choose those. He looked at her. I chose them before the Herath fleet positioned its deep pincer. I chose them when I made the 43-second communication. I choose them now. The capability is what it is. The choice is what I make. The choice has not changed. She looked at him with the vertiginous quality that had been with her for 2 days. The strangeness of the two things being simultaneously true. The gentle man and the name in the sealed record, and the 43 seconds on the open command frequency, and the fleet that had reversed course. The strangeness was not gone. She did not expect it to be gone. But underneath the strangeness was something stable, which was the man she had been looking at for 6 years, and the choice he was describing and the truth of both. She put her hand against his face. The hybrid varieties need water, she said. The eastern section, I noticed when I came through. He looked at the eastern section. Yes, he said. I was going to do that this evening. I'll do it, she said. You've had a long 2 days. He looked at her, the husband expression fully present, the underneath thing quiet in the way of something that had been used and had returned to rest. Myra, he said. Yes, she said. The rest of it, he said. The things I told you, the 43-second communication, what you know now. He paused. Are you? I'm your wife, she said. I've been your wife for 6 years, the rest of it is part of who you are. She looked at him steadily. I don't love the rest of it, but I love you. Those are both true simultaneously. He was quiet. The eastern section, she said. I'll water it. She went to the garden's eastern section and began the watering with the patient, attentive quality she brought to systems that required consistent care. The same quality that the atmospheric processors received. The same quality that had been received by everything in her life that was worth keeping. He watched her for a moment. Then he went inside and began dinner. The Accord's Strategic Command Division sent a communication to the residential address on Sarath Prime 2 days after the withdrawal. The communication was brief, an acknowledgement of the open frequency communication, a note of the identification, a statement that the Accord's Strategic Command Division remained available if the named individual required resources or support. Ren read it. He filed it in the location where the capability lived when it was at rest. Present, quiet, not the thing that the life was made of, not the thing the choice returned to. Available if the requiring came again. He did not respond that evening. He finished making dinner. He called Myra in from the garden. They ate in the kitchen with the used quality of 6 years of dinners. And Myra talked about the atmospheric processor calibration schedule that was resuming now that the emergency protocols were standing down. And Ren talked about the physical book he had been reading before the 43rd day, a history of pre-technological agricultural systems, which he had found at the Sorath Prime Market 3 weeks ago, and that described hybrid cultivation techniques that he wanted to try with the eastern section's second planting. And the dinner was good. And the conversation had the quality of the life continuing, which was the quality it had always had, and which was the quality it would have tomorrow and the day after. The Herath sovereignty, in the strategic reassessment that followed the withdrawal, did not include a second attempt at the contested outer systems in any of its projected scenarios. The 43 seconds had been sufficient for the recalibration. The summary in the cross-reference entry had been sufficient. The 6 words of the commander's response, confirmed identification, withdrawing, this engagement ends, had been sufficient. The galaxy had searched the name. The galaxy had found the summary. The galaxy had recalibrated. Outside, Sorath Prime's evening continued with the patient quality of a planetary evening that had no knowledge of what had happened in the last several days. The atmospheric processors cycling. The hybrid varieties in the garden requiring 3 more weeks before the harvest. The dwelling's lights warm in the residential section's northern quarter. The Accord's communication sat in the filing location. It would be answered eventually. An acknowledgement of receipt, a decline of the standing offer, a statement that the named individual's situation was stable and did not require resources or support. The statement would be accurate. The situation was stable. The named individual did not require resources or support. The named individual required the eastern section's second planting and the history of pre-technological agricultural systems and the atmospheric processor calibration schedule and the dinner and the 6 years and the hand against the face in the garden and the life that the choice was made of, that the choice returned to, that the choice was ongoing and deliberate and present every morning in the garden and every evening in the kitchen and every Tuesday at the market with the 7-item list. The capability was what it was. The choice was what he made. He made it every day. The hybrid varieties would be ready in 3 weeks. The life continued.